Hello there, William Golding with another chapter of Lord of the Flies. We'll be doing chapter 10 today. Want to take a minute and let you catch your breath after a very intense and emotional chapter 9, which was the crisis/climax of the story. Now in terms of plot structure, we're in that moment where we reach the climax. We are going to have falling action that occurs from this point forward to the resolution of the story, and that will take place over the next 3 chapters. We know that Simon has died. Simon was killed by the other members of Jack's tribe. The symbol of the Lord of the Flies becomes very key and important to this point going forward. Yes, they are evil in terms of their actions and their disregard for the rules, the disregard for Ralph's structure and the structure of the conch, that they begin to rebel against that. And they think when they go over to Jack's side of the island, when they go over to the Castle Rock, that they are free from the rules, that they are free from the conch. Basically, the cost of all this is the cost of their freedom. And you're going to see Jack's rule on the island go away from the democratic idea. As he mentioned several chapters ago, we only need a few people deciding things. What good was it when Robert or Bill or Piggy or Simon spoke? Basically some foreshadowing of Jack's dictatorship on the island. And yes, he is worshipped like a god, and that gets to his head. The pride of putting himself on a stature above everyone else because he's the hunter, and he puts himself on the same plane as the Lord of the Flies. He puts himself on the same plane as the beast. I will protect you from the beast. I will provide you these things. But you're going to have to give me your liberty. You're going to have to give me your freedom. You're going to have to become one of my minions, one of my slaves. And that becomes very evident in this following chapter. And that's where we get to chapter 10, the shell and the glasses. Piggy eyed the advancing figure carefully. Nowadays, he had found that he saw more clearly if he removed his glasses and shifted the one lens to the other eye. But even through his good eye, after what had happened, Ralph remained unmistakably Ralph. He came now out to the coconut trees, limping and dirty, with dead leaves hanging from his shock of yellow hair. One eye was a slit in his puffy cheek and had a great scab that had formed on his right knee. He paused for a moment and peered at the figure on the platform.
Piggy, you the only one left?
There are some little uns.
They don't count. No big uns?
Oh, Sam and Eric. They're collecting wood.
Nobody else?
Not that I know of.
Ralph climbed on the platform carefully. The coarse grass was still worn away where the assembly used to sit. The fragile white conch still gleamed by the polished seat. Ralph sat down in the grass facing the chief's seat and the conch. Piggy knelt at his left, and for a long minute there was silence. At last Ralph cleared his throat and whispered something. Piggy whispered back. "What did you say?" Ralph spoke up. "Simon." Piggy said nothing but nodded solemnly. They continued to sit, gazing with inspired sight at the chief's seat, at the glittering lagoon. The green light and the glossy patches of sunshine played over their befouled bodies. At length Ralph got up and went to the conch. He took the shell caressingly with both hands, and he knelt, leaning against the trunk. "Piggy? Huh? What are we going to do?" Piggy nodded at the conch. "You could call an assembly, Ralph laughed sharply as he said the word. Piggy frowned. You're still the chief. Ralph leaned again. You are. Over us. I got the conch. Ralph! Stop laughing like that. Look, there ain't no need, Ralph. What's the others going to think? At last Ralph stopped. He was shivering. Piggy? Huh? That was Simon. You said that before.
Piggy. Piggy? Huh? That was murder.
You stop it. What good are you doing talking like that? It was dark. There was that bloody dance. There was thunder and lightning and rain. We were scared. It wasn't what you said.
Oh, Piggy!
Ralph's voice, low and stricken, stopped Piggy's gestures, and he bent down and he waited. Ralph, cradling the conch, rocked himself to and fro. Don't you understand, Piggy? The things we did. He may still be. No. Perhaps he was only pretending. Piggy's voice trailed off at the sight of Ralph's face. You were outside the circle. You never really came in. Didn't you see what they did? There was loathing, and at the same time a kind of feverish excitement in his voice. Didn't you see, Piggy? Not all that well. I only got one eye now. You ought to know that, Ralph. Ralph continued to rock to and fro. It was an accident, said Piggy suddenly. That's what it was, an accident. His voice shrilled again. Coming in the dark. He had no business crawling out like that out of the dark.
It was an accident. He was batty. He asked for it. It was an accident.
You didn't see what they did. Look, Ralph, we got to forget this. We can't do no good thinking about it, see? I'm frightened. Of us. Oh, I want to go home. Oh, God, I want to go home. It was an accident, said Piggy stubbornly, and that's that. He touched Ralph's bare shoulder, and Ralph shuddered at the human contact. And look, Ralph! Piggy glanced round quickly and leaned in close. Don't let on that we was in that dance. Not with Sam and Eric. But we were! All of us! Piggy shook his head. Not until the last. They never noticed in the dark. Anyway, you said I was only on the outside. And so was I, muttered Ralph. I was on the outside too. Piggy nodded eagerly. That's right. We was on the outside. We never done nothing. We never seen nothing. Piggy paused and then went on. We'll live here on our own, the four of us. 4 of us? We aren't enough to keep the fire burning. We'll try. See, I lit it. Sam and Eric came dragging a great log out of the forest. They dumped it by the fire and turned to the pool. Ralph jumped on his feet. Hi, you two! The twins checked a moment and then walked on. You're going to bathe, Ralph. Better get it over. The twins were very surprised to see Ralph, and they flushed and looked past him to the air. Oh, hello. Fancy meeting you, Ralph. We just been in the forest to get some wood for the fire. We got lost last night. Ralph examined his toes. You got lost after the... Piggy cleaned his lens. After the feast, said Sam in a stifled voice, and Eric nodded. Yes, after the feast. We left early, said Piggy quickly. Because we were tired. So did we. Very early. We were very tired. Sam touched a scratch on his forehead, and then hurriedly took away his hand. Eric fingered his split lip. Yes, we were very tired, repeated Sam. So we left early. Was it a good... The air was heavy with unspoken knowledge. Sam twisted and the obscene word shot out of him. Dance? Memory of the dance that none of them had attended shook all 4 boys convulsingly. We left early. Okay, so what I want to speak of in regards to this particular scene is that I attempted to show the lack of empathy towards this situation. Ralph is having a moment where he feels remorseful about not being able to stop Simon's death, not being effective in terms of being a leader and getting all the boys on the other side of the island to come back to the fire and to the conch. And so he takes personal responsibility upon himself for the death of Simon, even though he in reality had really nothing to do with Simon's death. It was really all Jack and the other hunters' fault. And that's what Piggy logically attempts to explain. He says, look, Ralph, we have nothing to feel guilty about. I mean, we did everything we could possibly do. And then rather than placing the blame on Jack and his misdeeds and his misaction, instead, Piggy blames it all on Simon. He says it was all Simon's fault. It was his fault he came out of the dark. He was crazy. He was batty. And so we see a lack of empathy from Piggy. We have the lack of the ability to understand and feel any remorse for the death of Simon. And Ralph, meanwhile, doesn't accept this answer, that morality wins over with Ralph, that he recognizes that he was chief, he was voted in chief, and he was not able to protect everyone on the island. The boy with the mulberry mark on his face died in the fire, and now Simon has died, and this has all happened under what he perceives as his watch. And now that he is facing these difficult circumstances, he's having difficulty coming to grips with his emotions, and so his emotions are taking over, and he feels a heavy burden of responsibility. And then when Sam and Eric come into the scene, they basically excuse themselves from the whole situation by claiming that they were tired and they went home early, that they didn't participate. But they were right there. They participated in that slaying of Simon, yet they are unwilling to acknowledge or accept responsibility for that. And so all the boys, all 4 of them, Ralph, Piggy, Sam, and Eric, having a conversation and coming to a conclusion that they weren't even there. And so they're going to basically lie through this hell scenario in order to feel better about themselves. When Roger came to the neck of the land that joined the castle rock to the mainland, he was not surprised to be challenged. He had reckoned during the terrible night on finding at least some of the tribe holding out against the horrors of the island in the safest place. The voice rang out sharply from on high, where the diminishing crags were balanced on one another. "Halt! Who goes there?" "Roger." "Advance, friend." And Roger advanced. "You could see who I was." "The chief says we got to challenge everyone." Roger peered up. "You couldn't stop me from coming if I wanted." "Couldn't I? Climb up here and see." And Roger clambered up the ladder-like cliff. "Look at this." A log had been jammed under the topmost rock, and another lever under that. And Robert, leaning lightly on the lever, and the rock groaned. The full effort would send the rock thundering down the neck of the land. Roger admired. "He's a proper chief, isn't he?" Robert nodded. "He's going to take us hunting." He jerked his head in the direction of the distant shelters, which were a thread of white smoke that climbed up the sky. Roger, sitting on the very edge of the cliff, looked somberly back at the island as he worked with his fingers at a loose tooth. His gaze was settled on top of a distant mountain, and Robert changed the unspoken subject. He's going to beat Wilfred. Well, what for? Robert shook his head doubtfully. I don't know. He didn't say. He got angry and made us tie Wilfred up. He giggled excitedly. He's been tied up for hours waiting. But didn't the chief say why? I never heard him. Sitting on the tremendous rock in the torrid sun, Roger received the news as an illumination, and then he ceased to work at the tooth and he sat still, assimilating the possibilities of irresponsible authority. Then, without another word, he climbed down back of the rocks toward the cave and the rest of the tribe.
Ow! Ow! Ow!
Take him away!
The chief was sitting there, naked to the waist, his face blocked out in white and red. The tribe lay in a semicircle before him. The newly beaten and untied Wilfred was sniffling noisily in the background. Roger squatted with the rest.
Tomorrow we'll hunt again. Then we'll leave another head for the beast. Some of you will stay and defend the gate.
The defenders of the gate will see that the others don't sneak in. The savage raised his hand, and the chief turned a bleak, painted face toward him. Well, why should they try to sneak in, chief? The chief was vague but earnest. They will. They'll try to spoil the things we do, so the watchers at the gate must be careful. And then, the chief paused. They saw a triangle of startling pink dart out, pass along his lips, and vanish again. And then,
The beast may try and come in. Remember how he crawled? He came disguised. The beast may try and come, even though we gave him the head of our kill to eat. So watch and be careful.
Stanley lifted his forearm off the rock and held up an interrogative finger.
But didn't we...
He squirmed and looked down. No! In the silence that followed, each savage flinched away from his individual memory.
No. How could we kill it?
The savages murmured again. So leave the mountain alone, said the chief solemnly, and give it the head if you go hunting. Stanley flicked his finger again. I expect the beast disguised itself? Perhaps, said the chief. A theoretical speculation presented itself. We'd better keep on the right side of him anyhow. You can't tell what he might do. The tribe considered this, and then was shaken as if by a flow of the wind. The chief saw the effect of his words and stood up abruptly.
Tomorrow, when we get meat, we'll have a feast. Chief? Yes, Bill? What'll we use to light the fire?
The chief's blush was hidden by the white and red clay. Into his uncertain silence, the tribe spilled their murmurs once more. And then the chief held up his hand. Tonight we shall take fire from the others. Listen, tomorrow we'll hunt and get meat. Tonight I'll go along with 2 hunters. Who will come? Morris and Roger put up their hands. Morris? Yes, chief? Where was there fire? Back at the old place by the fire rock. The chief nodded. The rest of you can go to sleep as soon as the sun sets. But us 3, Morris, Roger, and me, we got work to do. We'll leave just before sunset. Morris put up his hand. But what happens if we meet? The chief waved his objection aside. We'll just keep along by the sand, and if he comes, we'll do our dance again. Only the 3 of us? Again the murmur swelled and died away. Piggy handed Ralph his glasses and waited to receive back his sight. The wood was so damp and this was the third time that they had lighted it. Ralph stood back, speaking to himself. We don't want another night without fire. He looked round gauntly at the three boys standing by. This was the first time that he had admitted the double function of the fire. Certainly one was to send up a beckoning column of smoke, but the other was for a hearth now, and for comfort until they slept. Eric breathed on the wood until it glowed, and it sent out a little flame. A billow of white and yellow smoke raked up. Piggy took back his glasses and looked at the smoke with pleasure. If only we could make a radio, or a plane, or a boat. Ralph dredged in the fading knowledge of the world. We might get taken prisoner by the Reds. Eric pushed back his hair. They'd be better than... He would not name people, and Sam finished the sentence for him by nodding along the beach. Ralph remembered the ungainly figure on the parachute. He said something about a dead man. He flushed painfully at this admission that he had been present at the dance, and he made urging motions at the smoke with his body. Don't stop! Go on up! Smoke's getting thinner. Need more wood already, even when it's wet. My asthma... The response was mechanical. Sucks to your asthma! If I pull logs, I get my asthma bad. I wish I didn't, Ralph, but there it is. The three boys went into the forest and fetched armfuls of rotten wood, and once more the smoke rose yellow and thick. Let's get something to eat. And together they went to the fruit trees carrying their spears, saying little and cramming with haste. When they came out of the forest again, the sun was setting, and only the embers glowed in the fire, and there was no smoke. I can't carry any more wood, said Eric. I'm tired. Ralph cleared his throat. We kept the fire going up there. Well, up there it was small, but this has got to be a big one. Ralph carried a fragment to the fire and watched the smoke that drifted into the dusk. Well, we got to keep it going. Eric flung himself down. I'm too tired. What's the good? Eric! Cried Ralph in a shocked voice. Don't you talk like that! Sam knelt by Eric. Well, what is the good? Ralph tried indignantly to remember. There was something good about a fire. Something overwhelmingly good. Ralph told you often enough, said Piggy moodily. How else are we going to be rescued? Of course. If we don't make smoke, he squatted before them in the crowding dusk. Don't you understand? What's the good of wishing for radios and boats? He held out his hand and twisted the finger to his fist. There's only one thing that we can do to get us out of this mess, and anyone can play hunting. Anyone can get us meat. He looked from face to face. Then at the moment of greatest passion and conviction, that curtain flapped in his head, and he forgot what he had been driving at. And he knelt there, his fists clenched, and gazing sullenly at one another. And then the curtain whisked back. Oh, yes! So we got to make smoke! And more smoke! But we can't keep it going! Look at that! The fire was dying on them. Two to mind the fire, said Ralph. Half to himself. That's 12 hours a day. We can't get any more wood, Ralph. Not in the dark. Not at night. We can light it every morning, said Piggy. Nobody ain't gonna see no smoke in the dark. Sam nodded vigorously. It was different when the fire was up there. Ralph stood up, feeling curiously defenseless with the darkness pressing in. Let the fire go then for tonight. And he led the way to the first shelter, which still stood, though battered. The bed leaves lay within, dry and noisy to the touch, and in the next shelter a Litlin was talking in his sleep. The four Biggins crept into the shelter and burrowed under the leaves. The twins lay together, and Ralph and Piggy at the other end, while there was more than continual creak and rustle of leaves as they tried for comfort. Piggy? Yeah? All right? I suppose so. At length, save for the occasional rustle, the shelter was silent. An oblong of blackness, relieved with brilliant spangles, hung before them, and there was a hollow sound of surf on the reef. Ralph settled himself for his nightly game of supposing. Supposing they could be transported home by jet. Then before morning they would land at that big airfield in Wiltshire, and then they would go by car. No, for things to be perfect, they would go by train, all the way down to Devon, and take that cottage again. And then at the foot of the garden, and the wild ponies would come and look over the wall. Ralph turned restlessly in the leaves. Dartmoor was wild, and so were the ponies, but the attraction of wildness had gone. His mind skated to consideration of a tamed town where savagery could not set foot. What could be safer than the bus centre, with its lamps and wheels? All at once, Ralph was dancing round the lamp standard. There was a bus crawling out of the bus station, a strange bus. "Ralph! Ralph! What is it? Don't make a noise like that." "Sorry." From the darkness, the further end of the shelter, came a dreadful moaning, and they shattered the leaves in them in fear. Sam and Eric, locked in embrace, were fighting each other. "Sam! Sam! Hey, Eric!" Presently all was quiet again. Piggy spoke softly to Ralph.
We've got to get out of this.
What do you mean?
Get rescued. I mean it. If we don't get out of here soon, we'll be balmy.
Round the bend.
Crackers.
Have you written a letter to your auntie lately?
I don't know where she is now, and I haven't got an envelope or a stamp. And there isn't a pillar box or a postman.
The success of this tiny joke
haven't
overcame
said
Ralph.
anything
His
very
sniggers
funny.
became uncontrollable, and his body jumped and twitched. Piggy rebuked him with dignity. "I haven't said anything at all funny." Ralph continued to snigger, though his chest hurt. The twitching exhausted him until he lay breathless and woebegone, waiting for the next spasm. During one of these, the pauses he ambushed by sleep. "Ralph! You've been making that noise again. Do be quiet, Ralph, because—" Ralph heaved over among the leaves. He had reason to be thankful that his dream was broken, for the bus had been nearer and more distinct. Why? Because? Be quiet and listen. Ralph lay down carefully. To the accompaniment of a long sigh from the leaves, Eric moaned something and lay still. The darkness, save for the useless oblong of stars, was blanket thick. "But I can't hear anything." "There's something moving outside." Ralph's head prickled. The sound of his blood drowned all else, and then subsided. "I still can't hear anything." "Listen! Listen for a long time." Quite clearly and emphatically, and only a yard or so away from the back of the shelter, a stick cracked. The blood roared again in Ralph's ears. Confused by images chased each other through his mind. A composite of these things was pounding round the shelters. He could feel Piggy's hand against his shoulder, and a convulsive grip on his hand. "Ralph! Ralph! Shut up and listen!" Desperately, Ralph prayed that the beast would prefer Litlands. A voice whispered horribly outside.
Piggy. Don't make a sound. We've got to get you, Piggy. Piggy.
Where are you, Piggy? We've come to get you.
Piggy kept still for a moment, and then he had his asthma. He arched his back and crashed among the leaves with his legs. Ralph rolled away from him. Then there was a vicious snarling at the mouth of the shelter, and the plunge of the thump of living things. Someone tripped over Ralph in Piggy's corner, and became a complication of snarls and crashes and flying limbs. Ralph hit out, and then he and what seemed like a dozen others were rolling over and over, hitting, biting, and scratching. He was torn and jolted, found fingers in his mouth, and he bit them. A fist withdrew and came back like a piston, so that the whole shelter exploded into light. Ralph twisted sideways on the top of a writhing body and felt his hot breath on his cheek. He began to pound the mouth below him, using his clenched fist as a hammer. He hit with more and more passionate hysteria as the face became slippery. A knee jerked up between his legs, and he fell sideways, busying himself with his pain. And the fight rolled on over him. Then the shelter collapsed with smothering finality, and the anonymous shapes fought their way out and through. Dark figures drew themselves out of the wreckage and flitted away until screams of the Litlins and Piggy's gasp were once more audible. Ralph called out in a quivering voice, "All you Litlins go back to sleep! We've had a fight with the others. Now go to sleep!" Sam and Eric came close and peered at Ralph. "Are you two all right?" "I think so." "I got busted." "Well, so did I. How's Piggy?" They hauled Piggy clear of the wreckage and leaned him against a tree. The night was cool and purged with immediate terrors. Piggy's breathing was a little easier. "Did you get hurt, Piggy?" "Not much." "Well, that was Jack and his hunters," said Ralph bitterly. "Why can't they just leave us alone?" "We gave them something to think about," said Sam, honestly compelled to go on. "At least you did. I got mixed up with myself in the corner." "I gave one of them the what for," said Ralph. "I smashed him up all right. He won't want to come and fight us again in a hurry." "And so did I," said Eric. "When I woke up, somebody was kicking me in the face. I got an awful bloody face, I think, Ralph. But I did him in the end." "Well, what did you do?" "I got my knee up," said Eric with simple pride. "And I hit him in the pills. You should have heard him holler. He won't come back to the shelter in a hurry either. So we didn't do too badly." Okay, so what you kind of have to notice here is that when Jack and the other hunters come into the shelter, they come in the dark, and then Piggy and Ralph and Sam and Eric begin fighting each other, not realizing that they're fighting each other, and Jack and the hunters were able to basically raid the shelter for what they were looking for. And what's funny about this situation is Ralph doesn't realize that he was punching Eric in the face, and Eric didn't realize that he had kneed Ralph in the groin area. Ralph moved suddenly in the dark, but then he heard Eric working his mouth. "What's the matter?" "Just a loose tooth." Piggy drew up his legs. "You all right, Piggy?" "I thought they wanted the conch." Ralph trotted down the pale beach, and he jumped onto the platform. The conch still glimmered by the chief's seat. He gazed for a moment or two and then went back to Piggy. "Well, they didn't take the conch." "I know. They didn't come for the conch. They came for something else, Ralph. What am I going to do?" Far off along the bow stave of the beach, 3 figures trotted toward the castle rock. It kept away from the forest and down by the water. Occasionally they sang softly, occasionally they turned cartwheels down by the moving streak of phosphorescence. The chief led them, trotting steadily, exulting in his achievement. He was chief now in truth, and he made stabbing motions with his spear, and from his left hand dangled Piggy's broken glasses.